The GTX 960, a highly popular Maxwell 2.0 card when it first launched, it's a card still somewhat considered in low-end builds today, either for its DirectX 12 support, driver support, don't quote me on that, and fairly cheap prices. On eBay, it costs usually around between $60 and $80, although two variants of the card exist, one with 2 gigs of GDDR5 VRAM and 4 gigabytes of GDDR5. For this video, we have the 2 gig model, and we're going to be seeing how it holds up with gaming in 2023.
Yeah.
So, for this video's benchmark lineup, we're going to be using Red Dead Redemption 2, Overwatch 2, Valorant, Tiny Tina Wonderlands, and Apex Legends. Starting off with Red Dead Redemption 2, 720p gameplay might not look the best on a 1440p monitor, although it can look like 4K if you squint hard enough. At 720p low settings, we have an average of 49 FPS, and after turning on FSR 2.0 to performance mode, this jumps from 49 to 60 FPS average. Of course though, the low textures make it look like it were from a game from the PS2 era. Next up, when it comes to Overwatch 2 at 1080p ultra settings, the 960 gets an average of 102 FPS. With FSR 1.0, this drops to 91 FPS. A small note to make whenever you change settings, it likes to cap itself at 31 FPS, and this is fixed while setting its 600 FPS frame cap, in which I think the 960 won't be achieving anytime soon. Out of curiosity, I noticed that the Pentium seems to be holding up fairly well with the 960, so I wanted to add Valorant to this lineup to test the limits of the Pentium. From the test results, the 960 and the Pentium can easily handle Valorant at both 1080p high and low settings, with FPS averages always being above 120 FPS. The 0.1 percentile lows are hideous, but these were mostly from devs, and I wouldn't worry too much about these, maybe unless you're in a comp game. Although many reviewers don't use Tiny Tina's Wonderlands to test out hardware, I'm a bit too broke to afford games at the moment, so this will do. 1080p very low settings, you normally get above 60 FPS when walking around, but in heavy combat with tons of particles, the gameplay becomes a bit stuttery. Not the most ideal when trying to aim. In this game in particular, I do want to note that both the Pentium and the 960 were maxed out when playing. Aside from that, Tiny Tina's Wonderland seems fairly optimized. Apex played alright for the most part being. On 1080 very low settings, I would say it was the most stable game, being at a constant 61 FPS most of the time while I was gaming, but aside from that, nothing much to take note on. To conclude, most of the games tested were held back, surprisingly not by the dual-core Pentium, but the 960. This, of course, most likely due to the 2 gigs of VRAM that it has. In Red Dead Redemption 2, it was impossible to bump up textures to medium even on 720p. Overall, the 960 is still a 1080p esports behemoth to this day. I just wouldn't bother too much with AAA games without having any low expectations.